want to read these different prophetic words because I think they set the foundation for what that Lord would again have us look at. This is from September the 12th, 2023. There's a coming shaking and a resulting storm in this nation which has not yet been seen in the United States of America. While the shaking will be seen and experienced in every sphere of society, the storm coming to America should not be my people's focus. Rather, the focus should be on the purpose for which I've called my people in the middle of the storm. Then the Lord emphasized to me the following: my people must not be moved by the storm, but rather by my voice and divine purpose. My people must not be moved by the storm, but rather by my voice and divine purpose. For the Lord says, I will do an accelerated work through my people that will supersede anything I have done on the shores of America, and I will strike the ground in the United States of America and cause the prayers of saints, of previous and current generations to be answered. You can believe and trust me to come in unprecedented power and glory. This season, I will bring a birthing and a manifestation of prophetic words from long ago. It will be a renaissance move of my spirit in the United States. It will be a move of my spirit that is characterized by the power of God, the glory of God, and the revelation of my Son. Focus, steadfastness, and perseverance are essential to navigate the coming season. Do not lose heart. Great will be my people's fruit and reward in this season. In the 1950s, just want to point to this. As I read that, I always want to remind people of the history that we have in the United States of America. God began to do a number of things, and one of the things that he was doing, he was already doing something, but he was reestablishing what we know as the office of the evangelist. And there was a group of mainly men that formed this group headed by a guy named Gordon Lindsay called the Voice of Healing. And these men would move in great, great miracle power. I interviewed one of them because I preached for his son in West Virginia a number of years ago before he went to be with the Lord. And I asked him, I said, well, what was it like with the miracles? And he said, well, I would pray all day. And because there were con men back then trying to replicate the authentic, they would be very separated in a sense from the people to kind of verify their own integrity. Then he said, I'd walk into the meeting, and he said, they would normally preach what we would describe probably as an evangelistic sermon. Sometimes they would preach up to 2 hours. Oral would preach up to 2 hours. If you look at the clips on YouTube of Oral Roberts, mostly they're just clips. They're not the full message. And part of the reason they preached so long is because they wanted to put faith inside of people. And he described to me his healing gift as like a movie projector that would drop down, and he could look over audiences and he could see their conditions. He could see what was going on with them, and as God would heal them. So it's through a word of knowledge, like a movie gift. And so this was not just one, but there was many, and they had tents because there was no mega churches and buildings back then that could contain the crowds. Oral had the biggest tent at about 12,000, and there's a whole story with that. I won't get into it, but his tent, just the tent for the sick was 5,000. And sometimes he would pray every night for the sick and the invalid. And Brother Copeland describes one night being in the sick tent, and he was Brother Robert's pilot at the time, and he was learning at the time. He was a student at ORU, and Brother Roberts told him to pray for the people. And he said he was really anxious, and he started praying for this person with cancer and a big goiter. And then he said, then I heard what seemed like not even a human voice, but it was him commanding the goiter to go. He said it sounded like a lion speaking. He said, I never heard a voice like that of authority, and the goiter came rolling out of the person. They were instantly healed. And that was known as the Voice of Healing. And they would be introduced. You think this is funny, but it was introduced at that time, but they would introduce these men as God's man of faith and power, because they believed that the healing power of God would flow through this particular service. So this is part of the history, because I want to set the stage, because one of the things that the Lord is doing is he is releasing a new era, but what he did in the past is not divorced of what he's going to do in the present. And he's the one saying that I will do something unprecedented on the shores of America. And that's our history as a people. We have a history of the crowds gathering and people getting healed for hours on time. You know, the conventional human wisdom, you know, church consultants, it's not all bad. But they'll tell you, people don't want to be in service long. They're just, they're very busy, and just, give them what you can and get them in and out the door, and, keep them happy. They'll keep coming back next week. Keep it the same. And one time someone said that to me, and I just said, well, maybe people don't want to stay that long with what you're doing. But if God is there. Another lady evangelist. 5, 6, 7, 8 hours of the presence of the Lord. She was a healing miracle evangelist. I've talked to people who've been to every significant move of God in my lifetime. But all of them will come back and say, we never felt the presence like we did in Catherine Kuhlman's meetings. Yeah, she would be Pastor Benny would be, I would think, the carrier of that after. And I think Michael Koulianos is now the carrier of what Pastor Benny carried in his lifetime. Why do people stay? The presence of the Lord. That's right. So this is the history, and the Lord is saying, I'm going to do something accelerated. There's one time we had the privilege of hosting Lou Engle. I remember when I picked him up at the airport, he's rocking. He rocks everywhere. That's great. And I remember him saying to me, it always struck me, he goes, brother, we're either in the most significant time in the world of the move of God, or I've lost my mind. I go, you haven't lost your mind. And that's what I feel like. I've not lost my mind. I'm in the right mind. Yes. And I'm telling you, this is a time of divine positioning. Yes. Then just for the sake of time, December 22nd, 2023, I'm just going to read this part of it. I'm releasing heavenly blueprints to my people to live with the purpose of Joseph, have the heart of worship of David, have the excellence of Daniel, and know how to build like Nehemiah. This is from December 22nd, 2023. At the center of what I'm doing in the earth is a people whose greatest desire is to know me. I would really encourage you that some of where you may be being defeated in this season is a lack of growth in your life of intimacy. If your worship life is the same as it was 3 months ago, 4 months ago, you may need a shift. And I'm the guy who likes things the same. I've been in cities 4 or 5 days in a row. I eat at the same restaurant, the same meal, because it works. My wife's like, why don't you try something different? I said, I might not like it, might be disappointed in 30 minutes. Then on August the 25th and 26th, coming out of the previous month, the Lord told me a new era had begun. This is what the Lord said. Just as my hand was upon Joseph, David, Daniel, Nehemiah, and Samuel to shift a nation back to a righteousness, so is my hand upon this generation to learn to live from the inside out as never before and to shift nations back to righteousness. I want to define this generation distinctly to learn how to live from the inside out as never before. I want to define this generation distinctly by knowing the time and the seasons in which I live. And just for the sake of time, I'm not going to read that whole thing, but I think it's available on our website if you want to grab it, or you can grab a screenshot. We said last night that the will of God and God's divine design for all people is to be like Jesus. And we looked at the life of Joseph as someone who is a type and shadow of Jesus last night, and he learned how to live from the inside out. And it is essential, and one of the themes, and part of the reason I read all those, and I read them in completeness, or in part completeness last night, is because what struck me about those words is that every one of them talks about the prophetic nature of the desire of God for all New Testament believers. I believe that you can have a prophetic ministry and not be a prophet. I don't believe you can fully fulfill your purpose without learning to live in a discerning way and to reveal mysteries along the way to your purpose. There's going to come a point in your life where you're going to have an answer that cannot be intellectualized, that cannot be figured out by the previous training that you've had, and you'll have to understand it through God's lens. And here's the interesting thing about Jesus, and also it points to us. Jesus always lived correctly because he always lived from the correct perspective, but he had to choose that perspective even as the Son of Man. A rightly positioned heart will always produce a rightly lived life. And here's the important thing about all this is because you don't live in the world that you don't live in the world that exists, you live in the world that you perceive to exist. You don't live in the world that exists, you live in the world that you perceive to exist. Two different people can live in the very same environment, but perceive it differently. Luke 5 is a brilliant example of that. That it's actually a picture of life in the kingdom. That they're in a lake where they haven't caught any fish. They're fishermen, and all of their training, which is not completely bad, all of their training as fishermen, and all of their toil, which is a very paramount to the world system. What is a number one characteristic or number one characteristics of Americans today? They're tired. They're worn out. I travel pretty much every week. And if I'm within 2 hours of a church, if I'm just going on a Sunday morning or Sunday night, I leave on Sunday morning. You know why? No one's on the road on Sunday morning. Because they're all tired, sleeping in. So they work all night trying to catch fish, and Jesus comes on the scene with a different idea on how to fish. He's seeing the same environment where there's lack, and he's got an understanding from the Father on how to receive abundance. So you have the privilege of learning to see from God's perspective as a believer. And there's a design. It's actually the way you were created to live. You were not created this way. Here's the other thing about dominion. In Scripture, we may read it this morning, you'll find, right, that he gives them dominion over all the earth. And he makes a statement. He says, let them. He doesn't say, let us. That's very interesting. He says, let them. But nowhere in there does he give us dominion over other people. But you were not created to respond to everything that happened to you. So I want to look, at least for the next few minutes, we'll see how long we go this morning, or just see where the Lord takes us. I don't know exactly where we'll go, exactly everywhere we'll go, but in Genesis, we find the divine design of God of how to live from the inside out. And there's a context of the way the heart of man was created that's really, 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 really important to learn how to live from the inside out correctly. In Genesis 1, it says that God spoke the universe into existence. And the words, it says he created the heavens and the earth, which is a really, really important point, because the same environment that existed in original creation in heaven is the one that existed on the earth. This was the environment and environments are really, really important. How many sense the environment here this morning? It's beautiful. You're like, anything's possible. You might have walked in with some worries, with some concerns. You're like, I love you, Jesus. I know you got it. Yeah. So Adam is put into an environment where literally the abiding presence of the Lord is. And God puts the universe into, he puts it into order. So this is the environment which Adam was created to learn from God. It's another important point, is that every one of us have been learning since the moment we were conceived. The moment you were conceived, you began to pick up perception of the world around you. So God creates literally heaven on earth. In heaven, we know that there's streets of gold. In the garden, Genesis 2, there's onyx and gold. Like you have to really, really try to convince yourself that God is not into opulence and prosperity. You really do. You got to work really hard, but people have really worked so hard that when you preach correctly about it, people get mad. Everybody believes in prosperity. They do. The question is, do you believe in prosperity in God's way? Even people who preach against prosperity, they believe in prosperity. They want you to buy their book on not being prosperous. Have you ever noticed the ones who teach against it? They're pretty well off. Because they're also a lot of times the ones who teach that God chooses who goes to heaven. And guess what? They're the chosen one. Anyway, that's a whole different subject. They may be, anyway. So Genesis 1, then he creates man. Let us make man in our image according to our likeness. Let them, notice it says let them, this is out of New King James. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over all the cattle, over all the earth, over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. Verse 27. Well, let's just stop here. The context of Adam and Eve being created as human beings and learning to live from the inside out is the first words that Adam and Eve hear are words of blessing. Blessing is to endow with power, success, prosperity, longevity. It is God saying, all that I am, which is good, kind, gracious. And we realize prosperity, finance is just one very small part of prosperity. He's saying, all that I am, I give to you. I give you favor. I give you goodness. And in that word is the power to fulfill that word. So we were created to live from the blessing of the Lord, from the favor of the Lord. He's also saying the task that I've given you, the purpose I've given you, I'm empowering you to live in that purpose. God is way beyond extraordinarily gracious in that everything he's ever required you to do, he first gives to you as a gift. He's like, I need, you're designed to live by faith, so let me give you my faith. He actually rewards you for what he gave you the power to do. That's a pretty good God. This week, it's my wife's birthday. She's 2, so I haven't done this yet, but maybe next year I'll give her some money to my daughter. Say, go get your mommy something for her birthday. She's going to take you Hadassah. But her dad is the one who gave her the empowerment to do that. So you're created to live from a place of blessing. Yes. You're created to live from a place of purpose. This is the starting place that we were created to live from. And then you keep reading here. Look at, well, let's just keep going here. Genesis. I'm in the wrong place here. Verse 27, that's where we let off. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. And God blessed them and said, be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. Verse 27 is really, really, really important right there. He makes man in his image, likeness, resemblance. We weren't created as little gods, but we were supposed to be the closest thing to God on the earth. There's never been a group of human beings until Adam was created. And when he says, let us, the other created beings are probably all there, and they're all watching to see these created beings that God has never before created before, and they're in awe of this creation that God has made that looks exactly like him. How do we know? Image, likeness, resemblance, pattern. You're not a little God, but like God, you have three distinct parts.
That's good.
You don't have a spirit, but you are a spirit. God is a spirit.
Yeah.
You're given emotions. God has emotions. You're given a mind. God has a mind and a heart. And just like the Trinity that is supposed to operate, they're three distinct parts, but it's often so difficult to distinguish them two because they're all in union with each other.
Right.
You're created to be in union with yourself.
Yes.
In a whole way, with the heart being the center of that. The second thing he does is male and female. Not to go on a whole different rabbit trail, but you'll see why the enemy attacks this image, because it's distinctly godlike. It's distinctly important to differentiate between male and female. It's also the foundation for how healthy life functions in the earth. And because he made us in the image of God, the family unit, the mother and the father, were to be the closest expression to God for a child. He calls them to multiply. What's one of the ways we multiply? The only way, but it's called children. So when that child is conceived, his mother and father were to be the primary representatives of God in the earth to that child. So you're made in the image of God, but you're also made in the image of your parents. You're made in the image of God, but you're also made in the image of your parents. You're made in the image of God, but you're also made in the image of your parents. And there are things that parents are supposed to give to children. And that's why people's understanding can be challenged or different ways of God when they come into the kingdom or get born again based upon their relationship with their own parents. Interesting. So where there's a lack of one of those things, I come from a family. My parents have had 50, 60 foster kids. They still have a child now in their 70s in their home. He came to their home when he was 4 months old. He just turned 12 years old. So I understand the beauty of that. But the original design of God, that was never God's best. Even a child adopted the moment he is born into the earth will know something is off when it's not his natural parents holding him. There will be a sense of a lack of security. It's just the way it works. Here's why these things are so important. You can never go beyond God's design. You can never, meaning that if we don't learn how to partner with God on these things, you'll always live at a deficit. Our nice ideas about God, our religious ideas of God don't change God, and they don't change his design. And so where we don't learn how to allow God to fill these needs in our life and learn that we actually have to acknowledge that we need them, then you will always live at a deficit. That's why years ago people were like, I don't believe what you just taught. It doesn't matter. I don't think I got everything perfect, but your belief of truth doesn't make it untrue. And so where you fail to align with God, you'll always live at a deficit. And your approach to God will always define what you can receive from God. So there's a design. We want to underpin that point. There's a design by which God has created you to function. And where you fail to understand the design, you will always live at a place of a deficit. It's just the truth of it. Where you don't, let me just use a really simple example. Where you never learn how powerful your words are, you always live at a deficit. To your own detriment. When Jesus says you can have what you say, it works whether you acknowledge it, believe it or not. He's not telling us to make it true in that moment. He's giving us understanding of truths that govern God and govern the universe, and he'd like you to make you effective in this world. See, behold, I've given you every herb seed which is upon the earth, face over all the earth, and every tree in which is just fruit, and the fruit of yielding seed, to it shall be meat. And to every beast of the earth, and every fowl of the air, to everything that creepeth on the earth, wherein there is life, I've given you every green herb for meat. And God saw everything that he made, and behold, it was very good. And evening, morning were the sixth day. Chapter 2. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. On the seventh day, God ended his work which he made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he had rested from all his work in which God created and made. So here's some key. These are distinct needs that every human being has. You'll find them in these scriptures. Years ago, in 1943, there was a secular psychologist called Abraham Maslow, and most people understand that he began to describe, it's used almost in every setting, as the common needs of man. He began obviously with survival, clothing, food. That's why poverty is such a curse. It's very, very difficult to live correctly every day if your greatest concern is what you're going to eat for lunch. Years ago, I was in the Philippines working with Iris in Philippines. I remember I was doing Bible studies every day. And one of the things I would make sure is that everyone had been fed, because it's just a completely different way of looking at the universe. Everyone has a need for safety, protection, security, order, love, and belonging. Everyone has a need for dignity and esteem. And the top of that pyramid, you can Google, it's just real simple stuff. I believe truth can be found anywhere as long as it's truth. Augustine, which is not one of my favorite people, in his commentary on the book of Timothy, he said, where truth may be found, we must celebrate it. That's why I don't see any disconnect between medical science and the gift of healing. I think they both come from the Lord. I encourage people, every year you should get a physical. I don't know, now I'm in my 24th year of ministry, I don't know how many people could have averted themselves lots of pain and tragedy, and some have, I believe, died before God intended if they just went to a physical every year. Just get things checked out.